They came rumbling through the jungle like iron beasts, small, fast, unstoppable. To the Japanese tankers who rode them, the Type 95 Heigo wasn't just a machine. It was a symbol of their nation's brilliance, proof that spirit and skill could conquer anything. But on a moonlit night in Saipan, that belief met reality. And reality came in the form of 50 caliber fire, tearing through steel, through pride, and through illusion. The Heigo's story didn't begin in defeat. It began in optimism. In 1933, when Japan's Imperial Army dreamed of a modern, fast-moving force, their main tank at the time, the Type 89, was heavy and painfully slow, barely managing 15 miles per hour. Fine for the trench warfare of the past, but useless for the lightning-fast battles the generals envisioned. So engineers at Mitsubishi Heavy Industries were ordered to create something revolutionary: a light, quick and dependable tank that could race alongside motorized infantry. Leading the project was engineer Tomio Hara, a quiet innovator who would shape Japanese tank design for years. His genius lay in simplicity: a bell-crank suspension system that made the tank nimble even across rough ground. By 1934, the prototype rolled out. It was small, sleek, and astonishingly fast, 45 kilometers per hour on roads, about 30 across open country. It could turn sharply, climb hills, and keep going long after heavier tanks bogged down. The Army was thrilled. Its air-cooled 6-cylinder diesel engine gave it range and reliability that Western crews would envy. But beneath that efficiency hid a fatal flaw: its armor. At just 12 millimeters thick at its strongest, it could stop bullets, but not much else. Against real tank guns, it was a coffin waiting to be tested. Still, the Army adored it. They named it the Type 95 Heigo, after the imperial year 2595, and by 1936, it was rolling off production lines. At barely 7 feet tall and just over 7 tons, the Heigo was smaller than most trucks. Inside, a crew of 3 men worked shoulder to shoulder, a driver up front, a machine gunner beside him, and a commander who had to aim, load, fire, and lead all at once. It was hot, cramped, and deafening. But in China, it worked. Against infantry with few anti-tank weapons, the Heigo was untouchable. Its 37mm gun and twin machine guns tore through enemy defenses. Chinese positions collapsed before its speed. In those early campaigns, Japanese tankers grew confident, even arrogant. They believed their Heigos were unbeatable. That belief met its first true test in 1939. On the Mongolian border at Guadalcanal there, Japanese tankers faced the Soviet Union's BT series tanks, faster, better armored, and armed with powerful 45mm guns. For the first time, the Heigo's thin armor offered no protection. Soviet shells punched through them like paper. Dozens burned on the steppe. The battle ended in disaster. You'd think that loss would spark reform. But Japan's high command saw Guadalcanal as an anomaly, a strange border skirmish that didn't represent future wars. They ignored the warning. 2 years later, that confidence seemed justified. When Japan launched its war across the Pacific, the Heigo was everywhere. In Malaya, the little tanks thundered down jungle roads the British thought impassable. In the Philippines, they spearheaded advances that crushed unprepared defenders, even when they met the American M3 Stuart light tanks. The Japanese managed to hold their own, at least for a time. Victories came fast, and the legend of the Heigo lived on. But as the war dragged on, the world changed, and the Heigo did not. By 1944, Japan's once fearsome tank was hopelessly outclassed, and nowhere would that become clearer than on Saipan, June 1944. 20,000 U.S. Marines stormed the beaches of Saipan under a storm of shells and gunfire. The island was vital, the last line before American bombers could reach Tokyo itself. Japan threw everything into its defense, including Colonel Takashi Goto's 9th Tank Regiment, 44 tanks in all, a mix of Heigos and the slightly larger Type 97 Chiha. On the night of June 16th, the ground began to shake. Japanese tank engines coughed to life, diesel fumes rolling across the dark fields. The regiment moved out, a column of steel heading straight for the Marine lines. The crews were confident. This was what they had trained for, but the Marines were ready. Sentries heard the rumble long before the tanks appeared. They raised the alarm. Machine gun teams swung into position. Tankers climbed into their Shermans. At 3:30 in the morning, the Japanese attack began. Through the dark, the tanks charged, black silhouettes roaring forward, guns flashing. Marines fired flares into the sky, and suddenly the night turned to day. Every Hago stood out in eerie white light. Then came the sound that would haunt every Japanese tanker who survived. The hammering roar of Browning .50 caliber machine guns. The Marines unleashed a wall of red-orange tracers. The heavy rounds tore through the night and through the Hagos themselves. To the defenders' shock, their bullets didn't bounce. They punched straight through the thin armor, entering one side and exiting the other. Inside, Japanese crews were trapped in a storm of sparks, smoke, and molten metal. Engines died. Fuel tanks ignited. One by one, the tanks stopped burning from the inside out. Some Japanese officers couldn't believe what they saw. They thought the Americans had invented a new kind of weapon. But there was no secret, just physics. The Browning's armor-piercing rounds could penetrate up to 20 to 25 millimeters of steel at a few hundred meters. Nay, more than enough to pierce the Hago's maximum armor, and the Marines didn't stop there. Sherman tanks joined the fight. Compared to the Hago's 7 tons, the M4 Sherman weighed over 30. Its 75-meter gun could destroy a Hago from a mile away. The Japanese fired back, but their 37mm shells bounced harmlessly off the Sherman's thick, sloped armor. The counterattack dissolved into chaos. Burning tanks lit the night sky. Infantry riding on the hulls jumped off and charged forward, only to be cut down by machine gun fire. Some Marines were so close that Hagos rolled right over their foxholes. They waited, then crawled out and attacked from behind with grenades and flamethrowers. By dawn, 31 Japanese tanks lay destroyed across the field. The 9th Tank Regiment was gone. For the Marines, it was a decisive victory. For Japan, it was a revelation. When the sun rose over Saipan, Marines walked among the wrecks. Each Hago was riddled with neat, round holes, perfect circles punched straight through the armor. You could trace a bullet's path from one side of a tank to the other. The once mighty Type 95, symbol of Japan's armored might, was now nothing more than scrap metal. From that day forward, the Marines knew the truth. A 50 cal could kill a Hago. No more fear, no more mystique, just confidence and overwhelming firepower. For Japan, the truth was harsher. Their tanks weren't just outgunned, they were obsolete. The Empire's industry couldn't keep up. While Japan built just over 2,300 Hagos in the entire war, the United States was turning out nearly 49,000 Sherman tanks. Factories in Detroit and beyond ran day and night. Men and women, many building tanks for the first time, produced more armored vehicles in a month than Japan could in a year. It wasn't just a contest of machines. It was a contest of economies. And Japan had already lost. Even Japan's newer designs, the Type 3 Chinu and Type 4 Chito, came too late. Produced in handfuls and held back for homeland defense. By the final years of the war, Japanese tanks were dug into hillsides, buried up to their turrets, used as immobile pillboxes. On Iwo Jima, Colonel Nishi's tanks were entombed in volcanic ash, firing from fixed positions until they burned. On Okinawa, Japan launched one last armored charge, 27 tanks against more than 800 American Shermans. It ended in hours. By 1945, the once proud Type 95 Hago had become a relic, a ghost of an earlier age. It began as a symbol of Japan's rising power, but ended as a monument to its downfall. The Battle of Saipan wasn't just the death of a tank. It was the death of an idea, the belief that courage and willpower alone could overcome superior technology. In the jungles of Malaya and the hills of China, That belief had worked, but on Saipan, against American industry and firepower, it died, written in diesel smoke, shattered steel, and the roar of 50-caliber gunfire, and in the silence that followed, among the burning wrecks and twisted armor, the men who once believed their tanks were invincible learned a truth written in the very metal around them. Bravery without strength is sacrifice.